The first laugh came from Connor, and he tried to hide it in his fist. It didn't work. The conference room was too quiet, the table too polished, and everyone had been waiting to hear what Douglas Robles had left his only daughter. When Jesse Carr read the words for the sum of $1, Connor made a short choking sound and looked down at his boots. Michaela smiled without showing her teeth. Angela didn't laugh. She sat at the head of the table in Douglas's chair, wearing the dark green coat she'd worn to his funeral. Her hands stayed folded over the leather folder in front of her. Savannah looked at Jesse. "I'm sorry," she said. "What did you say?" Jesse was 52 and had handled ranch closings, grazing leases, and estate papers around Choteau for most of his working life. He wasn't a man who usually needed to repeat himself. That morning, he checked the page anyway. "And to my daughter, Savannah Robles, I leave the old Robles homestead and its contents, transferred for the consideration of $1. Connor leaned back. "He charged her for it?" "Connor," Angela said. "What?" "That's what it says." "It says consideration," Michaela corrected. "It's a legal formality." "Still $1 too much." This time Connor's laugh filled the room. Savannah kept her eyes on Jesse. She knew the old homestead. Everyone in the family did. It was a boarded cabin off Spring Creek Road, gray with age and half hidden by cottonwoods. Douglas had chained the access road 4 years earlier. He'd said the cabin was unsafe, the foundation was shifting, and nobody had any business going near it. Connor called it the Snake House. Michaela once suggested burning it during a controlled range cleanup. Angela had called it an insurance problem waiting to happen. Now it belonged to Savannah. Or it would, apparently, if she paid $1. Jesse lowered the will. "I need to finish reading." "There's more?" Savannah asked. "To the estate, yes. To my part." Jesse held her gaze a moment. "That is the full provision concerning you." The room became painfully ordinary. The heating vent clicked above the window. A pickup passed outside on Main Avenue. Someone in the next office dropped a stapler. Savannah placed both palms on the table. She didn't trust herself to pick up the paper in front of her. The paper might shake, and then Connor would see. 3 weeks earlier, she'd been standing behind the counter at the Choteau Pharmacy, ringing up cough drops for a rancher who still called her Doug's girl. Douglas had been dead for 11 months by then, long enough for most people to stop lowering their voices when they said his name, long enough for Angela to remove his old truck from the main ranch yard, long enough for Connor to repaint the cattle trailers with the Bowen Development Company's phone number along the bottom, not long enough for Savannah to pass the turn toward the ranch without looking down that road. She worked 4 days a week at the pharmacy and spent Fridays doing bookkeeping for 2 small businesses. Her apartment sat over a laundromat, where the dryer sent a low vibration through the floor every evening. The place had 1 bedroom, a narrow kitchen, and windows that froze at the corners in winter. It was clean. It was hers. That had become important. On the afternoon Jesse called, she was balancing the pharmacy drawer. "I'm scheduling the formal reading," he said. "Next Thursday at 10. Savannah tucked the phone between her shoulder and ear. "Do I need to be there?" There was a pause. "Yes. If this is about signing away something, you can email it." "It isn't." "Then tell me now." "I can't." Savannah looked through the front window. Snow had been pushed into dirty ridges along the curb. Across the street, a woman wrestled 2 grocery bags into the back seat of a car. "Angela already has everything," Savannah said. "I'd still like you in the room. Would you like me there, or do I have to be there?" "You don't have to do anything." That sounded like Jesse. It also sounded like Douglas. Savannah closed the register drawer. 10 on Thursday? 10 on Thursday. She almost asked whether Angela knew she'd been invited. Instead, she said, "Fine," and ended the call. That evening, she found a message from Connor waiting on her phone. "Jesse says you're coming next week. Just so we're clear, the ranch operation can't handle delays. Dad set things up before he died. We've been running it since. There's no reason for this to get ugly." Connor had called Douglas' dad after the wedding in 2015. Douglas never corrected him. Savannah had tried not to mind. At first, she'd even been glad. Her mother had died in 2010. For 5 years afterward, Douglas lived like a man waiting for a truck to return with something it had already hauled away. He ate from pans. He left the television on in empty rooms. He kept Savannah's mother's gardening gloves on a nail beside the mudroom door until the leather turned pale. Angela changed that. She brought matching dishes into the ranch house. She replaced the shower curtain and opened windows Douglas had kept shut. She remembered appointments. She made enough coffee for anyone who came through the kitchen. Savannah had been 14 when her mother died, old enough to know Angela wasn't replacing anyone. When Douglas married her 5 years later, Savannah stood beside them at the county courthouse. She signed as a witness. She bought Angela a small silver bracelet and meant the kindness. Connor was 24 then, restless and already talking about land development. Michaela was 18 and planning to study accounting before deciding she preferred legal work. They came with Angela, and for a while the new arrangement worked because everyone was careful. The trouble didn't arrive in one big event. It came through keys, passwords, and chairs at tables. Connor started helping Douglas with grazing contracts. Then Connor became the only one who knew where the current contracts were kept. Michaela organized the ranch accounts. Then bank employees stopped speaking to Savannah because she wasn't authorized. Angela took over Douglas's medical schedule. Then Savannah learned about appointments after they happened. By the time Douglas was diagnosed with terminal cancer in 2021, every path to him seemed to pass through someone else. Savannah tried anyway. She drove to the ranch one cold March morning with soup in a covered pot. Connor met her near the equipment shed. "He's sleeping," he said. "I'll put this in the kitchen. Angela doesn't want people waking him. I'm not people." Connor looked toward the house. "You know what I mean?" She did, and that was the problem. Savannah left the pot with him. 2 days later, she found it clean on the pharmacy counter with no note. Douglas called her that night. "Soup was good," he said. His voice sounded thin. "You could have told Connor to let me in. I was tired. I could have sat quietly." "I know." "Did you?" Another pause. Not that day. She stood in her apartment kitchen with one hand against the refrigerator. Downstairs, a dryer had gone off balance and was thumping through its spin cycle. "Are you scared?" she asked. Douglas breathed into the phone. He'd spent his life fixing fences in hail, pulling calves in freezing barns, and walking into rooms where bankers had already decided against him. Savannah had rarely seen him afraid. She knew he was then because he answered a different question. "There are things I need to put right." "What things?" "I'll tell you when I can." He never did. His condition worsened slowly, then all at once. There were hospital stays in Great Falls, home health visits, and medication schedules Michaela kept in a binder. Savannah visited when Angela allowed it. Sometimes Douglas slept through the entire visit. Sometimes he woke and asked about small things. "Still leaking under your kitchen sink?" "No. I fixed it. By yourself?" "The hardware store sold me a wrench." That wasn't the question. She smiled. "Yes, by myself." Another time, he asked whether she still had the red wool blanket from her mother. "It's on my bed." "Good." The last clear conversation they had happened on the back porch in late summer. Angela was inside speaking to a nurse. Connor had taken a call by the barns. Douglas sat under a blanket despite the heat. Savannah handed him a glass of water. His fingers closed around it, but didn't lift. "You doing all right?" he asked. "You're asking me?" I asked first. "I'm working. I'm paying rent. I've kept 2 houseplants alive. That many?" "Don't sound surprised." He smiled, then looked beyond the yard toward the western fields. The grass had gone yellow around the fence posts. "Do you remember Spring Creek?" he asked. "The creek or the road?" "The place." She thought of the boarded cabin and the heavy chain across the access gate. "You said to stay away from it?" "I did. You said the cabin was condemned. It might as well be." "Then why are you asking?" Douglas moved the water glass between his hands. "Just wanted to know what you remembered." Savannah remembered going there with him when she was young. She remembered a stone hearth blackened by old fires, a hand pump outside, a narrow porch where her mother once cleaned beans into a metal bowl. She remembered Douglas showing her initials carved into a cottonwood and telling her his grandfather had cut them there. Mostly she remembered silence. It had been the pleasant kind then. There were mice, she said. There were not. There absolutely were. Ground squirrels. In the kitchen? Douglas considered that. Bold ground squirrels. She laughed, and his expression softened. Then Angela opened the porch door. "You need to rest," she told him. Douglas gave Savannah the glass. "Listen to Jesse when the time comes." "What time?" But Angela was already helping him up. Savannah believed he meant the estate. She believed there might be a photograph, her mother's blanket chest, or his old saddle. Something personal Angela wouldn't want, and Connor couldn't turn into a contract. She didn't expect land. She certainly didn't expect the old homestead. At the will reading, Jesse moved through the visible estate in the same plain voice he'd used for Savannah's $1 provision. Angela received a life interest in the main ranch house, along with controlling ownership of the operating business. That meant she could live there, draw income, and make the major decisions. Connor received the heavy equipment, the newer stock trailers, and Douglas's interest in several grazing contracts. He nodded as Jesse listed them, as if confirming inventory he already considered his. Michaela received the primary bank accounts and ownership of the registered cattle brand. She asked one question about transfer forms, then wrote something in a yellow legal pad. Savannah listened to each item leave the room, though none of it had truly been hers. The ranch house had belonged to Douglas before he married Angela. The business had carried the Robles name. The cattle brand went back further than anyone could remember without checking courthouse records. Yet Savannah had been pushed so far outside the operation that objecting now would have sounded like reaching through a window for somebody else's supper. Jesse finished and removed his glasses. Angela drew a slow breath. Douglas wanted the ranch protected. That's what matters. Connor rubbed his thumb along the table's edge. It's what we've been doing. Savannah looked at him. Putting your company number on Dad's trailers? They're my trailers now. You painted them before the will was read. We knew how it was set up. Apparently everyone did. Michaela closed her legal pad. Savannah, nobody hid the general plan from you. No, you just hid Dad. Angela's face changed. It wasn't much, only a tightening beside her mouth. That isn't fair. Was it fair when I had to call you to ask whether he was conscious? He was dying. I knew that. You didn't see what the days were like, because you kept sending me home. Angela opened her hands. Your father couldn't handle tension. Savannah almost laughed. So you removed me? We managed his care. You managed everything. Connor pushed his chair back. This is exactly what Dad didn't want. You don't know what he wanted. I worked beside him every day, and I was his daughter. The words landed harder than Savannah intended. Connor looked away first. Jesse gathered the pages into a neat stack. There are acknowledgments to sign. Signing confirms receipt, not agreement. Michaela reached for the first copy. Savannah didn't. What happens if I don't pay the $1? She asked. Connor looked back at her. The smile had returned. Jesse didn't smile. The transfer documents already state consideration was received. Then why put it in the will? I can discuss that with you separately. Angela stood. You should discuss whether the building can legally be occupied. Douglas sealed it for a reason. I'm not moving into it. Good. Because it needs to come down. Connor buttoned his coat. The demolition probably costs more than the land is worth. The parcel is 640 acres, Savannah said. Mostly rough river bottom and scrub. There's no proper road, no usable buildings, and no direct connection to the ranch headquarters. You know a lot about land you think is worthless. I know the area. Michaela passed Savannah an acknowledgement form. Sign this so we can all leave. Savannah read the first paragraph. The words swam for a moment, not because they were difficult, but because her father had signed the will at the bottom. His name leaned slightly to the right. He always pressed too hard with a pen. She signed her own name. Connor picked up his keys. Congratulations on the snake house. Connor, Angela said again, though she sounded tired rather than offended. Savannah stood. Her chair legs scraped loudly against the floor. She wanted to walk out without another word. She wanted to make them wonder whether the laughter had reached her. She got as far as the door before Jesse spoke. Savannah, please stay. Angela glanced at him. Why? I need to complete an instruction from Douglas. Michaela stopped putting papers into her bag. What instruction? She asked. Jesse's expression remained neutral. It concerns Savannah's property. If it concerns the estate, I should hear it. It doesn't concern the probate estate. That was the first time anyone in the room looked uncertain. Connor's keys went still in his hand. Savannah turned from the door. What do you need? I'm taking you to the homestead. Today? Yes. There's snow coming. Then we should leave now. Angela stared at Jesse. The road is chained. I have bolt cutters. Connor gave a dry laugh. You keep bolt cutters in your office? They're in my truck. Why? Douglas told me to bring them. No one spoke for several seconds. Savannah watched Jesse place the will inside its folder. He knew something. She could see that now. He had known it, while Connor laughed, while Michaela explained consideration, and while Angela called the cabin an insurance problem. "What did Dad tell you?" Savannah asked. Jesse closed the folder. "He instructed me to drive you to the homestead in person. And to say nothing else." Connor stepped toward the table. "That doesn't make sense. It doesn't have to make sense to you." Michaela's eyes narrowed. "When did Douglas give that instruction?" Jesse picked up his coat. "That's not information you're entitled to today." Angela looked from him to Savannah. For the first time that morning, concern slipped through her careful expression. It wasn't concern for Savannah. "You shouldn't go inside that cabin," she said. "The floor could collapse." Savannah pulled on her gloves. "Then, I guess Jesse brought the wrong tool." She followed him downstairs and out to the street. Snow had started falling in small, dry flakes. Jesse's truck was parked beside the office, an older silver pickup with road salt whitening the doors. A long pair of bolt cutters lay behind the seat. Savannah climbed into the passenger side. Jesse started the engine, but didn't move. The heater blew cold air across their boots. "You had to know they'd laugh," Savannah said. "I knew it was possible, and Dad knew." Jesse looked through the windshield. "Your father knew his family." "That's not an answer. It's the only one I can give before we get there. Will you answer me once we do? I'll carry out his instruction." She turned toward him. "You've said that 3 times. I may say it again." "That's irritating." "I know." He pulled away from the curb. They passed the courthouse, the grain elevators, and the gas station at the edge of town. Choteau thinned behind them. Open fields spread under a low white sky, broken by fence lines and dark cattle standing near windbreaks. Savannah watched the road. She hadn't gone to Spring Creek in years. Even before Douglas sealed the cabin, nobody used it. The place had no reliable power, no working plumbing, and no furnace beyond the old stone hearth. The 640 acres around it had been treated as leftover ground, too uneven for easy development, and too separated from the main ranch to matter. Yet Douglas had made Jesse promise to bring her there, not mail her a key, not give her directions. Bring her in person, with bolt cutters, and say nothing else. Jesse turned onto Spring Creek Road. Snow hissed beneath the tires. Cottonwoods appeared along the creek, their bare branches dark against the fields. A mile farther, he slowed beside 2 leaning fence posts. A steel chain crossed the narrow access road. Beyond it, partly hidden by trees, stood the old Robles homestead. Boards covered the windows. The porch sagged toward one corner. Snow had gathered along the roof and against the stone chimney. Savannah stared at the cabin her father had sealed 4 years earlier. Jesse shut off the engine. The sudden silence made the place feel farther from town than it was. He reached behind the seat and took out the bolt cutters. "Whatever is in there," Savannah said, "you already know about it." Jesse opened his door. "I know what your father asked me to do. That isn't the same thing." "No," he said, "it isn't." He stepped into the snow and carried the bolt cutters toward the chain. The padlock had rusted into the chain, so Jesse set one handle against his thigh and leaned his weight into the other. The jaws bit twice before the link snapped. He pulled the chain through the posts. It dragged over the frozen ground with a heavy scraping sound. "Does that complete the instruction?" Savannah asked. "Not yet." Jesse returned the cutters to his truck and drove through. Savannah got out to loop the broken chain around one post. She didn't know why she bothered. Nobody would mistake the open road for an invitation. The track followed the creek for nearly half a mile. Snow had covered the ruts, and willow branches rubbed both sides of the truck. The cabin looked worse as they approached. Part of the porch railing lay flat beneath the snow. Several roof shingles had curled away from the boards. Gray plywood covered the 2 front windows. Another chain held the door shut. This one threaded through an iron ring Douglas had bolted into the porch post. Someone had taken time sealing the place. Jesse parked near an old hand pump. He stepped out, checked the ground, and pointed toward a dip beside the porch. "Stay left. There may be an old cistern under there. You've been here before?" "Not inside, but here. Once with Douglas." "When?" Jesse took the bolt cutters from behind the seat again. "When he sealed it." Savannah stopped beside the truck. 4 years ago?" "Yes." "What happened?" "He asked for help." "With what?" "The chains." She waited for more. None came. Jesse crossed the yard and cut the second chain. "You really are determined to be useless," she said. I'm determined to follow instructions. You make those sound like different things." He pulled the chain free and placed it against the wall. Douglas believed they were. The front door had swollen in its frame. Jesse turned the knob and pushed with his shoulder. Wood groaned, but the door stayed shut. Savannah stepped onto the porch. The boards dipped under her left foot. "Careful," Jesse said. "I thought that was your entire job today." She gripped the knob, lifted as she pushed, and felt the lower edge scrape across the floor. A strip of brittle weather seal broke loose. Cold dust blew through the opening. The smell reached her first. Old wood, mouse droppings, ashes, and something damp beneath all of it. Jesse used his shoulder again. The door moved 6 inches, then a foot. Savannah slipped through the gap. Light entered around the boarded windows in narrow lines. The cabin was one large room, just as she remembered, though memory had made it warmer and twice the size. A cast-iron cook stove stood against the north wall. Its pipe had come loose from the ceiling collar. A table lay on its side near the kitchen shelves. 2 metal bed frames leaned together in the far corner. There were no mattresses, curtains, or dishes. Whoever had cleared the place had left only what was too heavy or too useless to carry. The stone hearth took up most of the west wall. A rusted screen covered the fireplace opening. Snow had blown down the chimney and formed a white patch over the ashes. Savannah stepped farther inside. The floor creaked but held. "This is what he left me." Jesse stood in the doorway. "This and the parcel. 640 acres, Connor says, aren't worth anything. Connor says many things. You wrote the will, I prepared it. You knew everyone else was getting the ranch." "Yes, and you knew I was getting this." "Yes. Did you ask him why?" Jesse took off his glasses and wiped away a fleck of snow. "Several times." "What did he say?" "That the transfer had been handled." Savannah turned. "What transfer?" Jesse replaced his glasses. There it was. A pause too careful to be empty. "You heard that?" she said. "I did." "You said transfer." "The will uses that word." "But he told you it had already been handled." Jesse looked toward the hearth rather than at her. "I'm not permitted to explain your father's meaning." "Permitted by whom? He's dead." "By the written instruction he left me." Savannah walked back toward him. "Then show me the instruction." "I can't do that yet." "Why not?" "Because he asked me to deliver you here, make sure you entered, and give you one item." Jesse reached inside his coat. Savannah's breath caught before she could stop it. She expected a key, a letter, or some explanation that would make the morning less cruel. He held out a silver dollar. She stared at it. "You brought me here to give me this?" "Your father left it in the envelope with the instruction." "You said the consideration was already received." "Legally it was." "Then what is that?" "I don't know." She took the coin. It was colder than his hand. One side showed a woman in profile. The date beneath her neck read 1923. Was this his? Yes. Did he carry it? I don't know. Did he say what I'm supposed to do with it? No. Savannah closed her fingers around the coin. Anger was easier than disappointment, and for the moment, she was grateful for it. "You can go." Jesse glanced outside. "I'll take you back to town. I'm staying. You don't have a vehicle? I have a phone. Service is unreliable out here. Then I'll walk until it isn't." Snow moved past the doorway. Jesse studied her face, hoping perhaps that she'd reconsider. He knew Douglas had built his plan around her stubbornness, though he didn't know exactly where that plan led. That uncertainty had troubled him for 4 years. "The storm is supposed to worsen after 4, he said. "Then I have a few hours. For what? To look at what I paid for." "You didn't pay." Savannah held up the coin. "I have exact change." Jesse's mouth moved, almost a smile, but he thought better of it. He returned to the truck and came back with a flashlight, a wool blanket, and a small red first aid kit. "I don't need those. Humor me. You've had enough fun today." He set everything on the table, then righted it carefully. "The south corner of the roof leaked when Douglas sealed the place," he said. "Don't put weight on any ceiling boards under it. There's a hand pump outside, but don't drink from it until the water's tested. The nearest occupied house is Catherine O'Connor's, about a mile east along the creek." Savannah looked at him. "You can give me safety instructions, but not answers." "Yes, that must be convenient." "It isn't." "Go, Jesse." He stood there another moment. "Call me before dark." She didn't promise. The truck backed down the track. Savannah watched until the cottonwoods hid it. then listened to the engine fade. She was alone with the cabin. For the first few minutes, she did nothing. She stood inside the doorway with the silver dollar in one hand and tried to decide whether Douglas had meant the place as a gift or an apology. An apology would have been simpler. It also would have been too late. She put the coin in the small zippered pocket of her purse. Then she switched on Jesse's flashlight and began looking. The kitchen shelves held dust, nails, and 3 dead flies. A drawer beneath the counter contained a wooden spoon with the bowl split down the middle. She remembered her mother using one like it, but couldn't tell whether this was the same spoon or only an object her mind wanted to recognize. She checked the cook stove. Empty. The table had 4 straight legs and a scorch mark across one corner. When Savannah set it upright, she found faint pencil lines on the underside. Measurements, perhaps, or lumber calculations. Douglas used to write on whatever was close. She looked behind the bed frames and beneath loose boards. She opened the rusted fireplace screen. Ash collapsed under the flashlight beam. Nothing explained why Jesse had brought her there. Outside, the wind strengthened. Snow tapped against the plywood windows. Savannah walked the full room again, slower this time. The cabin wasn't simply abandoned, it had been emptied with care. Hooks remained where tools had hung. Pale rectangles marked the places where framed pictures had been removed. Even the mantel was bare. Douglas had sealed an empty room and waited 4 years to give it to her. She returned to the doorway and looked at the land. The creek lay beyond the cottonwoods, mostly hidden by brush. The open ground between the cabin and the water had gone wild with bunchgrass and willow. An old fence line angled north. Several posts had fallen, but the wire still ran beneath the snow. Farther west, the land rose in a long brown ridge. Savannah could just see cattle moving along the top. A pickup appeared there. It followed the fence, disappeared behind the rise, then came down toward the cabin from the north. The truck was white, with a feed tank in the bed and a dent above the rear wheel. Savannah recognized it before it stopped. Timothy Schmidt climbed out wearing insulated coveralls and a brown canvas coat. He was 58, broad through the shoulders, with a gray beard he kept trimmed close because loose whiskers froze while he worked. He'd been Douglas's foreman for 30 years. After Douglas became ill, Connor had moved him away from ranch management and offered him a yearly grazing lease on the land bordering the homestead. Timothy accepted because it kept his cattle fed and his household running. Connor had called it a favor. Timothy knew it was a way to move him out without firing him. He looked from Savannah to the open cabin. "Well," he said, "that gate hasn't been open in a while. How did you know I was here? Saw Carr's truck. Were you watching the road?" "I was checking cattle. From the ridge. That's where the cattle are." Savannah knew him well enough to hear the part he left out. "Did Jesse call you?" "No." "Did my father tell you to come?" "No." "Then why are you here?" Timothy opened the passenger door and pulled out a heavy push broom. "Because that roof has a hole and weather's coming." She looked at the broom. "You keep that in your truck?" "I brought it from my shop. So you saw Jesse come in, drove home for a broom, and came back." "And a tarp." He took a folded blue tarp from behind the seat. Savannah crossed her arms. "You knew I'd stay. I figured you'd either stay or need help carrying Carr out. He left on his own. That was wise." Timothy walked toward the cabin. She stepped in front of him. "What do you know about this place?" He stopped. "More than Connor," he said. "That's not a high bar." "No." "Why did Dad seal it?" "He didn't tell me." "Were you here when he did it?" "No." "I heard afterward." "What did he say?" Timothy rested the broom handle against his shoulder. "He said the cabin needed to sit quiet. That doesn't mean anything. I told him the same. And he said it didn't need to mean anything to me." That sounded enough like Douglas to be true. Savannah moved aside. Timothy entered, scanned the ceiling, then looked at the hearth. "Floor still feels solid," he said. "Jesse warned me about the south corner. He'd know. He helped board the windows." "He told you that?" "I saw him do it." "You were watching the road then too?" Timothy glanced at her. "People notice things out here." He set the broom down and dragged the bed frames away from the wall. Dust lifted in a gray cloud. Savannah covered her nose. "I didn't ask you to clean." "No, I haven't decided what I'm doing." "That's fine. You have your own work. I do. Then why does this matter to you?" Timothy straightened. He could have softened the answer. He didn't. "My grazing lease runs along this parcel. The north pasture, creek crossing, and winter access all depend on whoever controls this ground. If Connor gets it, He'll either raise my lease or end it. He's already asked what I'd take for my cattle. Savannah lowered her arms. So, you're helping yourself. In part. Thank you for saying it. I'm also helping you. Why? Because Douglas should have done better by you while he was alive. The words were plain. They still made her look away. Timothy picked up the broom. You want honesty? That's the honest part. He began sweeping from the south corner toward the door. Savannah found an old square shovel behind the cook stove and used it as a dustpan. They worked without speaking for several minutes. Under the dirt, the floorboards were rough pine, worn pale along the path between the door and hearth. Mouse nests came out from under the bed frames. Timothy found a cracked lantern chimney and placed it on the table instead of throwing it away. Why keep that? Savannah asked. Could match the lantern if it turns up. The cabin was emptied, mostly. You think something was left? Timothy pushed the broom into the fireplace. Douglas didn't do anything without leaving a reason behind. He left me $1. He left you 640 acres. Connor says it's scrub. Connor has never met land he didn't insult before trying to buy it. Savannah paused with the shovel. Would he want this? He wants anything that lets him control the creek road. Why? Access, maybe development later. He likes options. That was the first useful answer anyone had given her. They filled 2 feed sacks with debris. Timothy climbed onto the roof and stretched the tarp across the damaged corner, while Savannah held a ladder that had been lying beneath the porch. Snow collected on his shoulders. When he came down, the room had already begun to darken. You need heat if you're staying, he said. I didn't say I was. You sent your ride away. I can call another one? Are you going to? Savannah looked toward the hearth. No. It was a small decision, but she felt it settle. Timothy nodded once. There's split wood in my truck. The chimney needed clearing before they could light a fire. He removed the loose pipe from the cook stove and used a long brush from his toolbox. Savannah shoveled damp ashes from the fireplace. Near the back of the hearth, the shovel struck stone with a flat knock. She moved left and struck again. The sound changed. Savannah stopped. What? Timothy asked. She tapped the shovel across the hearth floor. Most stones answered with a dull, solid thud. One near the right edge sounded thinner. Hollow, she said. Could be a gap in the mortar. She crouched and brushed away ash. The stone was wider than the others, roughly square, with a dark seam around 3 sides. Its surface held a shallow round mark. Savannah took the silver dollar from her purse. The coin fit the mark exactly. Timothy came closer, but didn't speak. Savannah pressed down. Nothing happened. She turned the coin in the shallow groove. The stone shifted beneath her hand. Her pulse quickened. Help me lift it? Timothy fetched a narrow pry bar. He worked the tip into the seam while Savannah held the flashlight. Mortar broke loose in dry crumbs. The stone rose 1/2 inch. A cold draft touched her wrist. That isn't a settling crack, Timothy said. Together, they lifted the hearthstone and slid it aside. Beneath it was a narrow cavity lined with brick. A tin box rested at the bottom, dark with rust but still closed. Savannah reached in. The box was heavier than it looked. She carried it to the table and wiped the lid with her sleeve. Timothy stayed beside the hearth. You want me outside? No. You sure? No. But stay. The clasp resisted. Savannah worked it with the edge of the silver dollar until the rust gave way. Inside lay a small iron key, a torn sheet of yellowed ledger paper, and a folded note. The ledger page listed dates beside measurements marked in cubic feet per second. The oldest entry she could read was from 1912. Several names appeared in the margin, but part of the page had been torn away. Savannah unfolded the note. 2 words were written in Douglas's hard, slanting hand. Ask Catherine. Timothy read over her shoulder. Savannah turned the page, looking for anything else. There was nothing. Catherine O'Connor? She asked. She's the only Catherine your father ever listened to. Jessie said she lives east along the creek. She does. Savannah closed her hand around the rusted key. The cabin was no longer empty, and Douglas had never meant her to believe it was. She read the note again while Timothy built a fire. The damp ashes smoked at first. He opened the front door, adjusted the old screen, and fed in smaller pieces until the flame caught. Heat reached only a few feet into the room, but the orange light changed the cabin. Savannah sat at the table with the ledger page laid flat. What do those measurements mean? She asked. Water flow. I got that far. cubic feet moving past, one spot each second. Why would Dad hide them? Timothy placed another piece of wood on the fire. Maybe Catherine knows. She'd better. The wind pushed snow against the boarded windows. Savannah checked her phone. One weak bar appeared, vanished, then returned. She called Catherine. The phone rang 7 times before an older woman answered. Yes? Catherine, it's Savannah Robles. There was a rustle, then silence. Savannah? I'm at the old homestead. Another silence followed, but this one felt different. Did Jesse take you? He did. Did you go inside? Yes. Catherine let out a breath. All right. Savannah looked at Timothy. He'd turned away from the fire. I found something with your name on it. What did you find? A note from Dad. It says to ask you. Catherine didn't ask what Savannah was supposed to ask. Can you come here? Savannah said. Not in this weather. My hip and ice don't have a friendly history. I can come to you. Not tonight, you can't. The East Bend drifts shut. I need to know what he meant. I know you do. Then tell me. Catherine's voice softened. Some things make better sense with the papers in front of us. Come in the morning. Timothy knows the way. Savannah watched him place the fireplace screen back over the flames. He's here. I thought he might be. How? Because Timothy notices an open gate. Timothy shook his head, but Catherine couldn't see him. Savannah pressed her hand against the table. Did you know my father was leaving me this cabin? I knew he wanted you here. That isn't what I asked. It's what I can answer tonight. You and Jesse should start a club. I'm too old for clubs. Despite herself, Savannah almost smiled. Catherine continued. Keep anything you found dry. Don't clean the key with chemicals, and don't force it into a lock until you know where it belongs. Savannah looked at the rusted key. You knew there was a key. I knew there used to be. What does it open? Come for breakfast. The call ended. Savannah stared at her phone. Does everyone over 60 in this county speak in riddles? Mostly when talking to people under 60. You're not helping. I'm 58. Then you're close enough. Timothy gave her the blanket Jesse had left. He wanted to drive her to town, but she refused. Leaving now felt too much like obeying Angela's warning. It also meant abandoning the cabin with the hearthstone lifted and the tin box sitting on the table. Timothy checked the roof tarp, brought in more wood, and left a battery lantern beside the first aid kit. My house is 10 minutes away if the north track stays clear, he said. Call if the fire acts wrong. How does a fire act wrong? Smoke comes into the room. Sparks come down the chimney. The wall catches. Useful scale. Don't sleep with it burning high. He stepped onto the porch, then looked back. Lock the door. The chain is cut. There's a slide bolt inside. Savannah found it beneath a layer of dust and pushed it into place after he left. She ate crackers from her purse and drank half a bottle of water. The cabin made sounds as the temperature changed. Boards tightened. Wind moved around the chimney. Once, something scratched beneath the floor and stopped when she stamped her boot. She kept the key, ledger page, and note in Jesse's first aid kit. The red plastic box wasn't secure, but it was dry and easy to grab. Before lying down, she carried the lantern to the hearth. The lifted stone had revealed the brick cavity and nothing else. She ran the light along the seams between the remaining stones. They were irregular, old, and blackened by more than a century of fires. One stone near the rear looked newer. Savannah brushed ash from it, but the fire made the work too hot. She would have to wait. She slept in her coat on the table with the wool blanket folded beneath her. It was uncomfortable, but the table kept her away from the mice. Every time she woke, she checked the first aid kit. In the morning, snow covered the track and half the porch. Timothy arrived shortly after sunrise with the coffee, breakfast sandwiches, and a plastic bin of tools. Now, you look terrible, he said. You brought the wrong coffee. What's wrong with it? It tastes like the cup. That means it's hot. He put a snow shovel against the wall and inspected the chimney. Savannah ate standing beside the hearth. The egg in the sandwich had gone rubbery, but it was warm. Does Connor control your lease now? She asked. Angela controls the business. Connor handles the land agreements. When does yours renew? Timothy took his time answering. End of March. That's soon. It is. Would helping me give him a reason not to renew it? He doesn't need a reason. Savannah set down the coffee. You should have told me that yesterday. You asked why the place mattered to me. I told you. You didn't tell me you could lose the lease in weeks. I've been preparing for it. How? Looking for pasture. There isn't enough nearby, and hauling cattle costs money. If Connor cancels it, what happens? I sell part of the herd, maybe most. Timothy said it as if discussing weather. Savannah knew better. He'd built that herd over years. Selling under pressure meant buyers set the terms. You shouldn't be here, she said. I decide where I work. He'll know. Connor already knows I don't like him. That isn't the same as helping me search this cabin. Timothy closed the stove door. Douglas helped me buy my first cows. I helped Douglas keep this ranch standing through 2 dry years and 1 bad loan. Connor can decide what that means to him. Savannah understood then that the cabin's condition affected more than her pride. Whoever controlled the parcel could decide whether Timothy's cattle crossed it, drank near it, or grazed beside it. The homestead wasn't separate from the family operation because Connor said it was. It sat against the rest of the ranch like a hand on a gate. They drove east in Timothy's truck. Catherine's house stood behind a row of spruce trees. It was a small white place with a green roof and a porch swept clean of snow. A ceramic chicken guarded the steps. Catherine opened the door before they knocked. She was 74, with silver hair cut to her jaw and a cane tucked beneath one arm. You stayed at the cabin, she said. I did. Your father would have expected that. Savannah entered. That doesn't make it less irritating. Catherine pointed the cane toward the kitchen. Sit down, there are biscuits. The kitchen smelled of coffee and bacon grease. Old photographs covered one wall. In several, Douglas stood beside horses, trucks, or cattle panels. He looked younger, heavier, and less guarded. Catherine put the tin box on a folded towel after Savannah handed it over. She examined the ledger page first. This was Elias's book, she said. My great-grandfather? Yes. He filed the Homestead patent in 1911. This page came from the water records he started the next year. What water records? He measured Spring Creek. Not every day, but often enough to track what crossed the property. Why? Because water was the difference between holding that ground and losing it. Catherine touched one faded line. Elias filed a water claim in 1912. He used it for stock and irrigation. Other ranches downstream filed claims later. Savannah leaned closer. What happened to it? It stayed with the homestead. Why has nobody mentioned it? People did mention it. Then Douglas stopped. Timothy stood near the counter, listening. Catherine folded her hands over the cane. Douglas's father was a difficult man, proud, quiet, and certain that asking for help shortened your life. When he was dying, Douglas spent the better part of 2 weeks at his bedside. On the last night, his father made him promise the old water claim would never leave the family. When was that? More than 30 years ago. Were you there? I was in the hall. Douglas came out afterward and sat on the kitchen floor. He told me what he'd promised. Savannah tried to picture her father young enough to sit on a floor because a chair was too far away. Why tell you? We grew up on neighboring places. He trusted me. More than me. Catherine didn't rush to deny it. He trusted you with different things. He left me a 2-word note. He also left you the place, for $1. Catherine looked at the silver coin Savannah placed beside the ledger. That came from Douglas? Through Jesse? Catherine picked it up and studied the date. This was his father's. Douglas kept it in his desk. Why? Because it was the first dollar his father paid him for a full day's ranch work. Savannah touched the coin's edge. That's supposed to make the joke better? It wasn't a joke. Connor laughed. Connor laughs when he doesn't understand something. Catherine returned the coin. In 2021, Douglas came here after his diagnosis. He was 63 and angry at his own body. He told me the doctors couldn't give him much time. Then he said he'd made sure the homestead would stay in the family. What did he do? He said he signed papers in town. What papers? He didn't show me. Was Jesse involved? I assume so. Savannah sat back. Everyone assumes, and nobody answers. Catherine reached for the key. This belonged to the cellar hatch. What cellar? The root cellar under the hearth. Savannah looked at Timothy. He frowned. I've never seen one. It was covered before you came to work there, Catherine said. Douglas's father closed it after a support wall shifted. The hatch opened from the back of the hearth. Elias built the fireplace over the original stairs. The key opens it. If the lock hasn't rusted solid, what's down there? Potato bins, shelves, old stonework. That's all I ever saw. You've been inside? When I was young. Douglas and I used to sneak down there because it stayed cool in summer. Catherine held the key out but didn't release it when Savannah took hold. When Douglas visited in 2021, He asked whether I remembered the cellar. He asked if the back wall was stone or poured concrete. What did you tell him? Stone, except for one section his father repaired after a fire. Why would he care? He wouldn't say. Savannah pulled the key free. Catherine's expression tightened. He was frightened that day. Of dying? No. Of running out of time before he finished something. Outside, tires moved over packed snow. A vehicle stopped near the porch. Timothy looked through the kitchen window. It's Angela. Savannah stood. How did she know I was here? She may have seen my truck, Timothy said. Catherine's mouth flattened. People notice things out here. Angela knocked once and opened the door. She had changed out of the green funeral coat. Her wool coat was camel-colored, clean enough to show she hadn't walked far through the snow. She looked at Savannah, then at Timothy, then at the tin box on Catherine's table. I went to the cabin, she said. You weren't there. How did you get past the chain? It was cut. You told me not to go inside. I was concerned. Catherine remained seated. Morning, Angela, morning. Angela's eyes returned to the table. What is all this? Old papers, Savannah said. From the cabin? Yes. You shouldn't remove anything until Jesse inventories the contents. The contents belong to me. That's not what Michaela says. Michaela said the transfer was a legal formality. She's reviewing the documents. Savannah closed the tin box. Angela stepped closer. The cabin is dangerous. Connor can arrange demolition before somebody gets hurt. We could clear the debris and fold that acreage into the ranch. For what? Efficiency? And then what? Nothing? Grazing, perhaps? Timothy's shoulders went still. Angela noticed. Existing arrangements would be reviewed. His lease ends in March, Savannah said. That's between Connor and Timothy. No, you control the business. Angela seemed surprised that Savannah knew the distinction. This isn't the place to discuss ranch operations. Then why did you bring them here? I came because you spent the night in a condemned building. You didn't know that until you saw my things. Angela glanced at Catherine. Catherine gave her nothing. Savannah slipped the key into her coat pocket. I'm going back. I'll come with you, Angela said. No, I have a right to know what Douglas left on ranch property. It isn't ranch property, you heard Jesse. Angela's concern disappeared for one clear second. Then she picked up her gloves from the counter. Be careful what you turn this into, Savannah. Savannah carried the tin box toward the door. I'm trying to find out what it already is. At the cabin, fresh boot prints crossed the porch. Timothy crouched to examine them. Not mine. Angela? Could be. The front door stood slightly open. Savannah had pushed the slide bolt before leaving. Inside, the table drawer hung out. The bed frames had been moved. Jesse's blanket lay crumpled near the hearth. The red first aid kit was open. Nothing had been inside it after Savannah removed the tin box, but whoever entered couldn't have known that. Timothy checked the rear wall. There's no other door. Savannah looked at the disturbed room. Someone had come searching while Angela kept them at Catherine's table. Whether she'd planned it or merely provided the opportunity, Savannah couldn't yet prove. She placed the tin box inside her coat. Let's find the cellar. They let the fire burn low, then cleared the remaining ash from the rear of the hearth. Beneath the newer stone was an iron ring flat with rust. Timothy hooked the pry bar through it. Together, they pulled. A square section of the hearth rose an inch. Below its edge, an old lock held a recessed wooden hatch. Savannah knelt and inserted the rusted key. It resisted halfway. She adjusted the angle, pressed again, and felt the teeth settle. This time, when she turned it, the lock opened. The bolt moved with a dry scrape beneath the wood. Timothy took the key from Savannah before she could pull harder. Let me get the weight off it. He pushed the pry bar beneath the hatch and lifted while she turned the key again. The lock released. A stale draft came through the seam, carrying the smell of stone and wet soil. They raised the hatch together. Narrow steps descended under the fireplace. The first three were wood. Below them, the stairs had been cut directly into packed earth and supported with stone. Timothy held the lantern over the opening. It's deeper than I remember the floor sitting, Savannah said. The creek bank rises behind the cabin. Is it safe? No idea. That's reassuring. I can tell you it's safe if you'd rather. No? He lowered one boot onto the first step and tested it. The wood creaked but held. He tried the second, then stopped. You stay up here. Savannah moved past him into the opening. This is my cellar. It's also your funeral if the wall gives. Then check the wall. Timothy muttered something she didn't hear and followed. The stairway turned beneath the hearth. At the bottom, the lantern revealed a low room with stone walls and a dirt floor. Timber posts supported the ceiling. Most were thick and dry, but one near the stairs leaned at an angle. Wooden shelves ran along the north wall. Several had collapsed. Broken jars lay beneath them, their metal lids rusted into the dirt. The room was colder than the cabin, but not frozen. Water ticked somewhere in the dark. Savannah moved the lantern slowly. 2 empty potato bins stood beneath the stairs. A workbench had been built against the opposite wall. On it sat a glass bottle, a bent funnel, and a small hand scale with one pan missing. "Nothing looks disturbed," Timothy said. "Someone upstairs didn't find the hatch, or didn't have the key." Savannah touched the key in her pocket. The back wall had been built from rounded fieldstone, except for one rectangular section of pale concrete. It measured about 3 feet wide and 2 feet high. The surface was smoother than the rest, though age had cracked it near one corner. That must be the repair Catherine mentioned. Timothy walked toward it. "After a fire," she said. Savannah held the lantern near the concrete. A dark metal edge showed through one crack. Timothy brushed away loose grit. More metal appeared. "That isn't reinforcement," he said. He tapped the concrete with the handle of the pry bar. The sound was solid near the edges and hollow in the center. Savannah ran her fingers along the top. Beneath a thin layer of mortar, she felt a straight seam. Another cavity. "Looks that way. Can we open it?" "Not with our hands." They returned upstairs for tools. Timothy brought down a hammer, a cold chisel, gloves, and safety glasses. Savannah held the lantern while he chipped at the mortar along the metal edge. Each strike sounded through the small cellar. After 10 minutes, the outline of a steel door appeared. It belonged to a fireproof document box set into the wall. Mortar had been packed around it until the front looked like part of the repair. There was no combination dial, only a recessed handle and a small keyhole. Savannah tried the rusted key. It didn't fit. "Of course," she said. Timothy cleared more mortar from the handle. "Might not be locked. It has a keyhole. So does the table drawer upstairs. The table drawer opens." He pulled the steel handle. Nothing happened. Savannah tried next. The door remained fixed. "Can you break it?" "Probably." "Will that damage what's inside?" "Probably." She sat back on her heels. The box had been hidden well enough to survive a casual search. Douglas must have known the hearthstone would lead her to Catherine, and Catherine would lead her to the cellar. He had planned the order. That made forcing the box feel wrong. "There may be another key," she said. "Where?" He gave Jesse the $1. "He put this key in the tin." "Maybe there's another step." Timothy looked around the cellar. Douglas could stretch a simple job across a week. Did he enjoy watching people struggle? No. He thought finding an answer yourself made it harder for someone else to take it away. Savannah looked at the concrete around the box. What did he think someone would take? Timothy had no answer. They searched the workbench, shelves, and bins. Savannah ran her hands beneath the edges, feeling for tape or another seam. Timothy lifted the broken boards one at a time. Near the back of the lowest shelf, Savannah found a nail driven sideways into the stone. A loop of dark wire hung from it. She pulled. The wire brought out a small brass key wrapped in oilcloth. "Your father liked extra steps," Timothy said. He didn't trust easy ones. The brass key slid into the lockbox. Savannah turned it. The mechanism clicked. She pulled the handle, and the steel door opened 3 inches before catching on broken mortar. Timothy chipped the edge clear. Together they lowered the door. Inside were 3 bundles wrapped in waxed canvas. The first contained a thick envelope with Savannah's full name written across it. The second held several folded documents tied with cotton string. The third was a narrow leather ledger, blackened around the corners, but dry. Savannah touched the envelope first. Douglas had written her name in the same firm hand as the note, but more slowly. Timothy stepped away. "I'll check those supports. You don't have to." "I know." He moved toward the stairs, giving her the small courtesy of pretending not to listen. Savannah opened the envelope. A single sheet lay on top. "Savannah, if you found this, you listened long enough to reach the right room. Don't make any decisions today. Take the deed and the water filing to David Liu at the Montana Land Records Archive. He will know what to compare and where to look. Jesse can confirm what he witnessed. Catherine can tell you what I promised. There is another letter beneath this one. Read it after David tells you whether these papers are what I believe them to be. I am asking you to do it in that order because I need you to know the difference between a father's explanation and a public record. One is love. The other is proof. You will need both. Dad Savannah read it twice. Beneath the sheet was another envelope, sealed along the flap. Across the front, Douglas had written, "After David." She wanted to tear it open. She could hear him in the instruction. Don't make any decisions today. Ask someone who knows. Check the record before trusting the story. Douglas had rarely explained himself while alive. Now he was controlling the order of a conversation from a steel box in a cellar. Savannah put the sealed letter back. Timothy crouched near the leaning post. "You all right?" "No." He waited. "He sent me to a land archivist. David Liu? You know him?" "I've met him. Douglas used him for old title research." "When?" "A few years back." Savannah looked up sharply. "Before or after the cabin was sealed?" "I don't know. Think." "After Douglas got sick. That's all I remember." She opened the bundle tied with string. The first page was a deed dated in 2021. Douglas's name appeared as grantor. Savannah's appeared as grantee. She moved the lantern closer. The property description covered nearly half the page. She recognized Spring Creek, section lines, and the total acreage. Near the top, the consideration was stated as $1 and other value received. At the bottom were Douglas's signature, a notary seal, and a rectangular stamp from the Teton County Clerk and Recorder. The stamp included a filing date from 2021. Savannah looked at Timothy. "This says he gave me the property 3 years before he died." Timothy came back to the workbench. He read the page without touching it. "That's what it looks like. But I didn't sign anything." "You don't always sign to receive a deed." "I didn't know. He may have delivered it through Jesse or recorded it directly." "Can he do that?" "Ask David." She turned to the next document. It was older and more fragile. The paper had darkened to the color of weak tea. Typed lines crossed the top. Handwritten notes filled the margins. The heading named Spring Creek and the Robles Homestead. A filing date in 1912 appeared beside Elias Robles' name. The same flow measurements from the torn ledger page appeared in a small table. There were later stamps, certificates, and handwritten references Savannah didn't understand. One notation from 2021 pointed to the same document number shown on the deed. "What does this make mine?" she asked. "The water use tied to the parcel, maybe." "Maybe? I run cattle. I don't sort water titles." Savannah unfolded a map from the bundle. A blue line followed Spring Creek through the Homestead parcel. Red pencil marked 2 diversion points. One sat near the old hand pump. Another appeared along the north boundary beside Timothy's leased pasture. Timothy traced the line without touching the page. "That's my creek crossing, so the water goes through your lease. The cattle drink downstream from this boundary. Does Connor know?" "He knows there's a creek, not the filing." "I doubt it." Savannah looked back at the deed. Angela didn't know either. She didn't act like she did. She searched the cabin. "We don't know it was her. She kept us away while someone went inside. That's not the same as proof." "No, it isn't." Douglas's first letter had made that distinction too. Savannah carefully returned every page to the canvas wrapping. She kept the sealed letter inside its envelope. "We need to get these out of here." Timothy nodded toward the ceiling. "The cellar isn't dry enough for storage now that the hatch is open. I mean, before whoever searched upstairs comes back." They carried the bundles into the cabin. Savannah placed them in the plastic tool bin and covered them with a blanket. Timothy repaired the slide bolt by driving longer screws into the door frame. It would stop an honest visitor and slow down anyone else. Savannah called Jesse. He answered on the first ring. "I found a deed." Jesse said nothing. "It's dated in 2021, she continued. "It says Dad transferred the homestead parcel to me for $1. Your name is on the acknowledgement as a witness." "Yes." "So, you knew?" "Yes." "Why did the will treat it like I inherited the property?" "It didn't, exactly. The wording acknowledged the earlier transfer and left you the cabin's contents. Douglas wanted the provision read aloud, so Angela and the others would hear it. That was part of his instruction. And laugh. He couldn't control that. He expected it. Jesse's silence was answer enough. Savannah gripped the phone. Did he give me the land in 2021? I witnessed the deed and delivered it for recording. Then why didn't anyone tell me? Could he legally hide that from me? The deed wasn't hidden from the public. It was recorded. It was hidden from me. Yes. Why? That answer belongs in the letter, the one he told me not to read yet. Yes. Savannah closed her eyes. What is the water filing? Take it to David, Jesse. I'm not qualified to authenticate a document from 1912. Do you know what it means? I know what Douglas believed it meant. And you won't tell me. I won't let belief replace verification. She looked at the sealed letter. Someone searched the cabin this morning. Jesse's voice changed. Was anything taken? No. We had the tin box with us. Who knew you were away? Angela saw us at Catherine's. Did you see anyone enter? No. Then move the documents somewhere secure. I can put them in my office safe. Can Angela access it? No. Can Michaela? No. Savannah considered that. I'm keeping them tonight. I don't recommend it. I didn't ask. Then photograph every page. Don't flatten the old filing further than it naturally opens. Call David before you travel. He works by appointment. You had that ready. Douglas expected you to find the box. Did you? I hoped you would. Jesse gave her David's number. Savannah called from the cabin. The connection failed twice. On the third attempt, a man answered. She told him her name, Douglas's name, and the document dates. David became quiet when she mentioned the water filing. Does it have an embossed territorial seal near the lower left corner? He asked. Savannah checked. There's a seal. I can't read it. Don't rub it. Hold the page sideways under light. She did. Raised letters appeared around the edge. I see Montana, she said, and appropriation. Is there a priority date? There's a date in May of 1912. David asked her to read it. When she did, he repeated the date slowly. Where did you find this? In a fireproof box under the Homestead cabin. Did Douglas place it there? I assume so. Don't assume anything yet. Apparently Douglas chose his experts by personality. David told her to bring the documents the following morning. His office was in Helena, over an hour away in good weather. Before ending the call, he asked for the number stamped on the 2021 deed. Savannah read it. Computer keys clicked on his end. The county index shows that document, he said. Grantor, Douglas Robles. Grantee, Savannah Robles. 640 acres. Her knees weakened, and she sat on the edge of the table. So it's real. The index entry is real. I haven't seen the instrument yet, but it was recorded, yes. 3 years before he died, yes. Savannah looked around the room everyone had called worthless. Her father hadn't left her the homestead as a final insult. Legally, he hadn't left it to her at all. He had already given it to her while he was alive. She stayed seated while David told her how to protect the papers during the drive. When the call ended, Timothy found a clean feed sack in his truck. They wrapped the tool bin in it, then carried everything to his pickup. You can't leave them in the cabin tonight, he said. I'm not giving them to Jesse. I didn't suggest Jesse. Where then? My house has a gun safe. You keep papers in a gun safe? I keep tax returns in a flour tin. Nobody's perfect. He locked the bin inside the safe while Savannah watched. His house stood north of the homestead, on land he owned. 80 acres with a metal barn, a machine shed, and a kitchen that smelled faintly of toast. A framed grazing map hung beside the refrigerator. The homestead parcel lay directly south of Timothy's leased ground. Spring Creek crossed Savannah's property before bending through the pasture he used. Connor hadn't exaggerated about one thing. The homestead controlled access. Savannah sat at Timothy's kitchen table and called the county clerk's office. She asked for a certified copy of the deed by its recording number. The clerk typed for a few seconds. I have it, she said. There's also a cross-reference to an older water filing. Do you need that searched? Savannah glanced at Timothy. Yes. That one may take a little time. The index was converted from paper. I'll send an inquiry to the water records desk. When will it be ready? Possibly tomorrow afternoon. Savannah gave her email address and ended the call. Timothy set a plate of reheated stew in front of her. That inquiry is public, isn't it? She asked. County records usually are, so Michaela could see it. If she's checking. She's checking. Savannah slept in Timothy's spare room. She left her boots beside the bed and placed the rusted key on the nightstand. At 7 the next morning, a truck pulled into the yard. Timothy looked through the kitchen blinds. Connor? Savannah pushed back her chair. Did you tell him I was here? No. Connor knocked, but he opened the door before Timothy reached it. He wore a dark quilted jacket over a buttoned shirt. Snow melted along the edges of his polished boots. Morning, he said. Timothy stayed between him and the kitchen. You always enter houses before you're invited? You didn't answer your phone. It was 6:40. Connor looked past him. Savannah, can we talk? We are talking. Privately. Timothy moved toward the coffee pot. I can't hear much before my second cup. Connor's jaw tightened. Savannah crossed her arms. What do you want? To make you an offer. For what? You know what? I'd like to hear you say it. The Homestead parcel. Yesterday it wasn't worth demolishing. That was before you started treating it like buried treasure. I haven't treated it like anything. I spent one night there. Anne pulled the hearth apart. Savannah watched him. You searched the cabin. Connor glanced at Timothy, then back at her. The door was open. The slide bolt was locked. It wasn't when I got there. You moved the bed frames. I was checking the floor. You opened Jesse's first aid kit. I wanted to know what you found. Timothy put down his mug. Connor lifted one hand. Nothing was taken. That's your defense? Savannah asked. I'm trying to stop this from becoming a bigger mess. For you, for everyone. He placed a folded sheet on the table. It wasn't a formal contract. It was a one-page proposal printed on Bowen Development letterhead. We'll give you $75,000, he said. You sign the parcel to my company. We'll handle cleanup, taxes, access, everything. Why? Because the land borders the ranch. It bordered the ranch yesterday. Connor drew a slow breath. Michaela found the recorded deed. She didn't know about it? None of us did. Not even Angela? No. That answer came too quickly. Savannah looked at the proposal. Did you know Dad signed something in 2021? I knew he went into town with Jesse a few times. Did you ask why? He was sick. There were estate documents. He gave me the land before he died. We haven't established that. The county index has. An index doesn't tell you whether a document can be challenged. Michaela told you that. Michaela understands the law. She understands procedures. That's not always the same thing. Connor leaned against the counter. $75,000 is real money, Savannah. You could put a down payment on a house. You could stop working 2 jobs. What were you planning to do with the river bottom? Graze it. You already said it wasn't useful for grazing. Parts of it are. Try again. Connor looked toward the map on the wall. His eyes settled on the blue line marking Spring Creek. I've been working on a development concept, he said. Low-density homes, large lots, maybe a small lodge near the highway. Nothing final on Dad's ranch. On acreage the operation doesn't need. And you need my parcel. It gives us a cleaner route along the creek. Access, among other things. How long have you been planning it? A couple of years, before Dad died. Yes. Did he agree? He didn't say no. That is an agreement. He was too sick to make long-term decisions. Savannah thought of Douglas sealing the cabin that same year. He'd made at least one long-term decision. Why $75,000? Because the structure is a liability and the land needs work. What about the water filing? Connor's face changed. It lasted less than a second, but Savannah saw it. What filing? He asked. The one Michaela found with the deed. She found a reference and sent you here before breakfast. The parcel follows Spring Creek. Water records are normal. Then why are you nervous? I'm not nervous. Timothy poured more coffee into an already full mug. Connor looked at the spill, annoyed. Savannah slid the proposal back across the table. I'm going to Helena. For what? To have the records examined. By whom? That isn't your business. It becomes my business when your questions affect ranch title. The property belongs to me. According to one paper Dad signed while dying, he lived 3 more years. He was on medication. Angela handled his care. There are things you don't know. Then tell me. Connor folded the proposal along its original crease. You should take the offer before Michaela starts filing things. Is that advice or a threat? It's a fact. He left the house without saying goodbye. Timothy waited until the truck disappeared. He came to buy before he knew what you knew, he said, and he searched before that. He's afraid of the water filing. He doesn't know what it means. He knows enough to offer money. Savannah opened her mouth to answer, but another vehicle turned into the yard. Angela's sport utility vehicle stopped beside Timothy's barn. Michaela got out from the passenger side, carrying her yellow legal pad. "This feels organized," Savannah said. Angela removed her gloves as she entered. Michaela kept her coat on. "We need to settle this," Angela said. Connor tried. Connor gets ahead of himself. He offered $75,000. Michaela's pen paused above the pad. She hadn't known the amount. Angela did. "It's a generous offer," Angela said. "For land none of you wanted yesterday. We didn't know Douglas had moved it out of the estate. There it is." Angela's gaze hardened. "There what is? The part you're actually worried about." Michaela pulled out a chair. "The recorded deed creates problems beyond that parcel." "For whom?" "For the estate administration. The will describes the homestead as a transfer tied to a $1 consideration. If that deed was never properly delivered, the property may still belong to the estate. Jesse delivered it for recording. That doesn't prove Dad had capacity." Savannah stared at her. "You called him Dad, too?" Michaela looked down at the pad. "He raised me for 9 years. And now you want to say he didn't understand his own signature." "I'm saying his condition has to be considered." Angela stepped closer to Savannah. "Douglas had terminal cancer. Some days he didn't know whether it was morning or evening. In 2021, he had difficult days. He drove to Catherine's and told her what he'd done." "You've spoken to Catherine?" "Yes." Angela glanced at Timothy. "All of you have decided I'm the enemy." "No," Savannah said. "You decided I was outside the family before Dad died. That is not what happened." "Then what happened?" Angela opened her mouth, stopped, and looked toward the window. For years she had told herself that limiting Savannah's visits kept Douglas calm. The explanation had been partly true. Douglas became agitated after arguments. He lost sleep. He refused medication. But Angela had also feared what happened when father and daughter sat alone. Douglas might change a beneficiary. He might give Savannah authority. He might admit how much of the ranch's cash had already been committed to Connor's plans. Angela turned back. The ranch was under pressure, she said. Medical bills, equipment loans, feed costs. Connor put his own money into keeping things moving. Michaela reorganized the accounts. "I needed to know the house, and business would remain secure, so you controlled who saw him. I controlled disruptions." "You mean me?" "I mean anyone who made him question decisions already made." That was the answer, even if Angela didn't hear what she'd admitted. Savannah looked at Michaela. "And you? I've spent 3 years making the estate workable. Every account, every transfer, every creditor. Now, a deed none of us knew about appears from a box under a cabin. You're angry because you missed it. I'm concerned because hidden documents create risk. For the estate or for you." Michaela's pen stopped again. "If the homestead deed stands," she said, "Connor's development access changes. Timothy's lease is no longer ours to manage. The ranch may have obligations connected to the creek that aren't reflected in our accounts. Everything connects, and you need to control what connects. I need order." Angela sat across from Savannah. "Sell the parcel to Connor. The land comes back beside the ranch. Timothy's lease can continue, and you get enough money to start over somewhere comfortable. I didn't ask to start over. You don't live there. I own it. You learned that yesterday. I owned it for 4 years." Angela's voice softened. "Savannah, your father was trying to ease his guilt. He knew the ranch had to go to the people already running it. The cabin was something he could give you without damaging the operation. Then, why do you need it back?" No one answered. Savannah looked from Angela, who needed the ranch to remain her security, to Connor, now visible beside his truck outside, who needed the river bottom for his development, and finally to Michaela, whose place in the family depended on being the person no document escaped. Douglas's hidden deed threatened each of them differently. The laughter in Jesse's conference room hadn't come from confidence. It had come from certainty that nothing valuable could belong to Savannah. Now that certainty was gone. Michaela closed her legal pad. "If you take those papers to Helena, give us copies. No, then I'll request them through the county. Do that. And if the deed appears questionable, I'll challenge it. You haven't even seen it. I've seen the index. So have I." Michaela stood. "You have until Monday to reconsider Connor's offer." "What happens Monday?" "I file notice with the probate court." Angela looked at her daughter. "Michaela, We can't wait while Savannah carries old papers around in a feed sack. Savannah held Michaela's gaze. File whatever you think you need. Michaela put on her gloves. I will. Michaela followed Angela outside. Connor joined them near the vehicles. They spoke in a tight circle for less than a minute. Connor pointed toward the house once. Michaela shook her head. Then all three vehicles left in order, Connor first, Angela second. Timothy took the documents from his safe. You still want to go to Helena? More now. They left before 9. The highway was clear in places and polished with ice in others. Timothy drove with both hands on the wheel. Savannah held the tool bin on the floor between her boots. David Liu's office occupied the second floor of a brick state building. Metal shelving filled the main room. Flat archival boxes sat on long tables beneath white lamps. David met them at the security desk. He wore a blue sweater, reading glasses, and cotton gloves tucked into one pocket. Before we open anything, I need to know who handled the documents, he said. Savannah listed herself, Timothy, and Catherine. Did Catherine alter them? She looked at the ledger page. Did she unfold the water filing? No. Did anyone write on them? No. Good. He led them to a workroom where a camera hung above a padded table. Savannah removed the canvas bundles. David photographed each one before touching it. Then he put on gloves and opened the deed. He examined the paper beneath a bright angled light. He checked the notary seal, Douglas's signature, the recording stamp, and a faint series of marks along the bottom edge. What are those? Savannah asked. Microfilm reference numbers. The recorder added them when this was imaged. He turned to his computer and opened the certified copy Savannah had requested. It had arrived by email during the drive. David enlarged the first page until Douglas's signature filled the screen. Savannah stood behind him. The signature matched the one on the paper. So did the notary information, filing date, legal description, and document number. David compared tiny imperfections. A dark spot beside one letter appeared in both copies. A slight fold crossed the last line of the property description in the same place. This is the same instrument, he said, not a copy somebody made later. The paper from the lockbox is the original signed deed. The county image was created from it when Jesse presented it for recording in 2021. Does recording make it mine? Recording gives public notice. Delivery is what completes the transfer. Jesse's statement that Douglas gave him the deed for recording on your behalf supports delivery. The recorder's acceptance supports it further. What about the fact I didn't know? That doesn't automatically undo a beneficial transfer. Douglas conveyed the property to you, Jesse accepted the deed as your agent for that limited purpose, and the county recorded it. Douglas then retained a lifetime right to use the parcel under a separate recorded agreement. David brought up another document. Douglas had reserved use and responsibility for taxes until his death. The agreement ended automatically in 2024. So, the property never entered his estate, Savannah said. Not after 2021. Can Michaela challenge it through probate? She can file a challenge. People can file many things. But the probate court doesn't usually distribute property the deceased didn't own at death. What if she says he lacked capacity? That would require evidence about his condition when he signed. The notary acknowledgement and Jesse's testimony matter. So does the fact that Douglas handled related filings over several months. Several? David showed her the dates. The deed had been prepared in April, signed and notarized in May, then recorded in June. The retained use agreement was recorded the same day. This wasn't one confused signature made during a hospital visit, David said. It was a series of consistent acts. Savannah looked at her name on the screen. For 4 years, the county had known something she hadn't. David turned to the older filing. He used a soft brush to remove one loose grain of mortar, then placed the page beneath the camera. Under magnification, the embossed seal became clear. Territorial forms were still used in some county offices after statehood, he explained. That isn't unusual. The filing itself is dated May of 1912. He checked the clerk's certification, the legal description, and the handwritten priority notation. Then he opened a database of downstream claims. Lines appeared in date order. The first was Elias Robles' filing. Everything below it came later. How much later? Timothy asked. The nearest competing irrigation claim is from 1914. The larger downstream filings begin after that. So, this one is first, Savannah said. On the records I'm seeing, yes. Spring Creek claim number 12 carries the earliest priority date in this drainage. What does first mean? In a shortage, older rights are generally satisfied before newer ones. Specific use limits still apply. Nobody owns the water itself. The right is to use an established amount for recognized purposes. Can Connor use it for houses? Not without changes, approvals, and a serious review. Development is different from stock water or historic irrigation. Timothy leaned toward the map. My cattle drink below that northern diversion. David nodded. Continued stock use may help explain why the claim remained active. Savannah thought of Connor allowing Timothy's lease while treating it as a favor. He might have been maintaining evidence for a right he didn't know existed. Is the filing valid? She asked. The original document is authentic. The claim also appears in later state indexes. I can prepare a written authentication report and certified comparison. How long? 2 days for the full report. I can give you a preliminary statement today. Savannah took out Douglas's sealed letter. He told me to read this after you verified the papers. David removed his gloves. Then I think you can read it. She opened the envelope with a thin archival knife. The letter covered 4 pages. Douglas's writing weakened near the end, but every line remained clear. Savannah, if David says the deed and water filing are sound, then the homestead was yours before I died. Jesse recorded the deed for $1 because that was the cleanest way I knew to put it beyond my estate. The dollar he gave you belonged to my father. Keep it or spend it. He would tell you money only matters when it is doing a job. My father made me promise the Spring Creek right would stay with the family. I kept that promise, but I nearly kept it too quietly. That is my fault. Angela needs the house and ranch income to feel safe. Connor sees the river bottom as access for development. Michaela believes anything she cannot organize is a danger. They each have reasons. Their reasons would still lead them to the same place. They would combine the homestead with the operating ranch, change the water use, and sell or develop whatever brought the fastest security. I did not want that choice made before you knew what was there. I should have told you while I was well enough to sit across from you. I kept waiting for the right day, then I let other people arrange my days. I am sorry. I gave the homestead to you because you remember it before anyone called it useless. That does not mean you owe the land your life. You may sell it if that is what you decide after learning its value. You may work it. You may share the water. The promise was to keep the right from being taken through ignorance. It was not a command to make you unhappy. Catherine knows why the promise mattered. Timothy knows what the ground needs. Jesse knows what I signed. David knows what paper can prove. You need to decide the rest. Dad Savannah lowered the pages. Timothy looked at the shelves. David looked at his hands. Douglas hadn't asked her to forgive him. He hadn't claimed he was protecting her from everyone. He'd admitted he waited, stayed quiet, and allowed his household to close around him. That hurt more cleanly than an excuse. David gave her several minutes before speaking. The water filing needs a specialist, he said. Authentication tells us it's real. It doesn't establish present market value or every condition. Who does that? Gabrielle Moreno. She represents the Teton River Water Users Association. Wouldn't the association want the water? It wants certainty. That can align with you or conflict with you, depending on what you choose. He called Gabrielle from the workroom. She was in Helena for another meeting and agreed to come that afternoon. Gabrielle arrived carrying a laptop case and 2 rolled maps. She listened while David explained the chain of documents, then she read the filing and Douglas's letter. Did anyone downstream know this original was still intact? She asked. Apparently not, Savannah said. The claim was indexed, but the supporting measurements were considered incomplete. This ledger could fill part of that gap. She examined the blackened book from the lockbox. Its pages recorded flow measurements across several decades, along with irrigation dates and livestock counts. This is unusually good evidence, Gabrielle said. What does it prove? Historic use, location, and continuity. We still need survey work and a formal priority confirmation. But if the claim is recognized as written, it comes before every downstream right on Spring Creek. David said that. I'm telling you what it means on the ground. In a dry year, the holder of this right could make junior users stop taking water until the senior amount is met. Timothy shifted in his chair. That could shut half the valley. Potentially? Savannah looked at the map. I don't want to do that. Good. The association doesn't want it either. Then why would the right be worth anything? Because senior water creates choices. You can maintain historic use. You can negotiate shared management. You may lease part of the use, subject to approval. A buyer interested in the river bottom would pay for that control. How much? Gabrielle opened a folder on her laptop. Comparable land and water transactions are difficult because no two claims are identical. With 640 acres, confirmed access, and this priority date, an initial appraisal would likely place the combined property near $4.1 million. Savannah thought she'd misheard. 4.1 million? Near that amount. It could move after surveying and formal review. Timothy sat very still. Savannah looked at Douglas's dollar on the table. Connor had offered $75,000. Does Connor know? She asked. He may know a senior claim exists. He won't know my valuation. Keep it that way. Gabriel nodded. Nothing leaves this room without your authorization. She explained the next steps. Surveyors would verify the diversion points. The association would review possible sharing terms. A priority date hearing would be scheduled after notice to affected users. Savannah signed nothing except permission for Gabrielle to examine certified copies. I'm not selling, she said. Today? Gabrielle asked. Today. That's enough for now. Before leaving Helena, Savannah placed the original deed, water filing, ledger, and Douglas's letters in a secure archival case David provided. They drove it directly to Jesse's office after dark. Jesse locked the originals in his safe. Savannah kept certified copies, David's preliminary authentication, and Gabrielle's written valuation estimate. A court courier was waiting when she returned to Timothy's house. Michaela had filed the challenge early. The notice claimed Douglas lacked capacity when he transferred the homestead and asked the probate court to treat the parcel as a state property. A hearing had been set 45 days away. Savannah read the date twice, then folded the notice around David's preliminary report. Michaela had given her a deadline. Douglas had given her proof. The next morning, she and Timothy found a new chain across the Homestead Road. It was heavier than the one Jesse had cut. A bright brass padlock held it between the same leaning posts. A laminated sign hung from the center. Access. Suspended pending estate review. Michaela's name appeared at the bottom. Timothy got out and read it. She doesn't control this road. She wants it to look like she does. My cattle need the north crossing. Savannah photographed the chain, sign, and tire tracks. Then she called the sheriff's non-emergency number and explained that someone had blocked access to her recorded property. The deputy who returned her call asked whether she had a copy of the deed. I do. Email it with the photographs. If the road is fully within the conveyed parcel, you may remove an unauthorized obstruction. Don't damage anything you can avoid. Savannah sent the documents from her phone. Timothy opened his toolbox. You want the bolt cutters? No. She used 2 wrenches to unfasten the chain from a new metal bracket Connor had attached to one post. They laid the chain, padlock, and sign neatly beside the fence. If they put it back, Timothy asked. We document it again. Connor called before they reached the cabin. You removed a legal notice. I removed your chain. Michaela posted it. On land none of you own, that's what the hearing will decide. The recorded deed already decided it. Then you shouldn't be worried. I'm not the one buying larger chains. He hung up. During the next 45 days, the family stopped pretending its concern was personal. Michaela sent formal requests for every paper from the lockbox. Through Savannah's attorney, Helen Price, she received certified copies of the deed and water filing. David's complete authentication report followed. Gabrielle provided only the portions of her assessment related to historic use and priority, not Savannah's private valuation estimate. Connor sent a survey crew toward the southern boundary without permission. Savannah met them at the gate and showed the crew chief her deed. He apologized, turned both trucks around, and later emailed that Connor had represented the parcel as disputed ranch property. Angela called once. I want you to understand that court isn't personal, she said. You claim my father didn't know what he was doing. He was very ill. So it's personal to him. We're protecting the ranch. From what? From being broken apart. It was already separate. Dad made sure of that. Angela lowered her voice. He made one hidden decision near the beginning of a terminal illness. That doesn't erase everything we built afterward. You built Connor's project around land he didn't own. We built around what Douglas told us. What did he tell you? That the operation would remain secure. He left you the house and business. Without control of that river bottom, they may be worth less. There it was again. Enough was never the same as secure when someone else held a gate. Savannah didn't argue further. She worked at the cabin whenever weather allowed. Timothy replaced the weakest porch boards. Savannah removed the plywood from one window and covered the opening with clear plastic until new glass arrived. They braced the leaning cellar post, cleaned the chimney, and installed a locking steel cabinet for tools. The place remained rough, but each repair made it harder to describe as abandoned. Catherine came one afternoon carrying the split wooden spoon Savannah had found. "That belonged to your mother," she said. "You're sure?" She cracked it making chokecherry preserves. Douglas said he'd repair it and never did. Catherine sat at the table while Savannah glued the split and wrapped the bowl with cotton cord. "He wasn't good at finishing small things," Savannah said. "No, only secret deeds and underground boxes. He nearly failed to finish those too." Catherine had agreed to testify. So had Timothy, though Connor sent notice that his grazing lease wouldn't be renewed. The notice arrived by certified mail 3 weeks before the hearing. Timothy read it beside the cook stove. "Effective end of March," he said. "No reason given. I can lease you pasture. You don't know the ground well enough to promise that yet. I know where your cattle already graze. That isn't the same as knowing carrying capacity, fencing costs, or water conditions. Then help me work those out." He folded Connor's notice. "If the deed stands." When it stands. Timothy looked toward the repaired window. "You sound like Douglas." "I'm not sure that's a compliment. It wasn't meant as one." The morning of the hearing, Savannah arrived at the Teton County Courthouse before 8. Snowmelt dripped from the stone steps. The probate calendar was posted behind glass near the entrance. Rob Lee's estate. Property challenge appeared third. Angela and Connor stood near the security station. Michaela sat on a bench with 3 binders arranged beside her. Their attorney, Peter Lang, spoke quietly to them. Michaela wore a navy suit and the expression she used when presenting ranch accounts. Connor had polished his boots again. Angela wore the dark green coat from the will reading. Savannah passed them without speaking. Helen Price waited outside the courtroom with Jesse, Catherine, Timothy, David, and Gabrielle. Helen was a local probate attorney with a calm voice and a habit of holding her pen between both hands. "They're going first," she told Savannah. "Let them put their theory on the record. Don't react. Even when they get something wrong, what if they lie? Write it down. Will the judge know? By the time we're done." The courtroom opened at 8:30. It held 6 rows of wooden benches, a witness chair, and 2 tables facing the judge. Several ranchers sat in the back. Word of the water filing had traveled after the association mailed notice of its future priority review. Connor noticed them and whispered to Peter. Judge Ellen Mercer entered at 9. Everyone stood. She reviewed the case number, identified the parties, and looked over the filed exhibits. The challengers contend the 2021 deed should be set aside for incapacity and lack of valid delivery, she said. They also ask this court to determine that the Homestead parcel belonged to Douglas Robles at death, and therefore passes under the residuary estate. Is that accurate? Peter stood. Yes, Your Honor. Helen rose. The respondent's position is that the property was conveyed and recorded 3 years before death, never entered probate, and cannot now be redistributed through the estate. Judge Mercer nodded. Mr. Lang, call your first witness. Angela took the stand. Peter asked about Douglas's diagnosis, his medications, and the way the household operated in 2021. He became confused, Angela said. He tired easily. He depended on me for appointments and major decisions. Did he discuss transferring 640 acres to Savannah? No. Would that have been unusual? Very. We discussed the estate often. He wanted the ranch kept together. Savannah wrote, did he say together or secure? Peter asked whether Douglas concealed paperwork. He became private after the diagnosis, Angela said. Jesse visited without always telling me why. Douglas drove into town on days he wasn't supposed to drive. Did you believe he understood the consequences of giving away the Homestead parcel? No. Angela's answer was firm. On cross-examination, Helen asked whether doctors had declared Douglas incompetent. No. Did any court appoint a guardian? No. Did he continue signing ranch checks? Yes, with help. Did the ranch honor those checks? Angela hesitated. Yes. Did Connor use Douglas's signatures on grazing and equipment agreements during the same period? Peter objected. Judge Mercer allowed the question. Angela folded her hands. Yes. Connor testified next. He described the homestead as neglected acreage historically treated as part of the ranch. The business relies on connected access, he said. Splitting that parcel creates operational problems. Did you invest money based on the understanding it would remain with the ranch? Peter asked. Yes. Planning, engineering, access studies. For ranch use? Connor paused. For future land use. What kind? Residential development with agricultural restrictions. Peter's face tightened. He hadn't wanted that detail yet. Helen wrote something and waited. Connor continued. He said Savannah had never managed cattle, maintained ditches, or paid taxes on the homestead. He said she learned about the deed only after Douglas died. She didn't accept anything in 2021, he said. She didn't even know. On cross-examination, Helen asked about the $75,000 offer. It was an attempt to settle. Before or after you learned of the 1912 water filing, Connor shifted. Around the same time. Did you tell Savannah about your development concept during the will reading? No. Did you enter the cabin without permission and search it? Peter stood. Relevance. It goes to Mr. Bowen's claimed concern for preserving property. Judge Mercer allowed it. Connor looked at Savannah. The door was unsecured, he said. That wasn't my question. Yes, I entered. Did you find the deed? No. Did you know where it was? No. So, your development planning assumed control of land whose title you hadn't checked. Connor's mouth tightened. I relied on family information. Michaela took the stand last. She explained the estate accounts, the will provision, and her belief that the $1 language showed the transfer remained incomplete. If Douglas intended a lifetime gift, she said, Savannah should have received the deed while he was alive. Instead, it was hidden under a condemned cabin and mentioned in his will. Peter asked why she filed the challenge, to protect the estate from an irregular transfer made while Douglas was vulnerable, and to protect your own inheritance. My inheritance is tied to the ranch's stability. Michaela looked toward the people seated behind Savannah. The water claim has already caused uncertainty throughout the valley. Savannah could use it to interfere with every downstream ranch. The property needs to remain under experienced family control. Savannah wrote the sentence exactly. Michaela had brought them into a public courtroom to say Douglas couldn't be trusted. Savannah couldn't be trusted. And control belonged to the people who laughed before they checked. Judge Mercer looked at the clock. Ms. Price, she said, you may begin your case. Helen stood. I called Jesse Carr. Jesse took the witness chair and described the deed signing in 2021. Did Douglas understand the property he was conveying? Helen asked. Yes. How do you know? He corrected a section number in the first draft. He also changed the retained use agreement because I had made him responsible for fencing only through the end of that year. He wanted responsibility through his lifetime. Did anyone pressure him to sign? No. Did he deliver the deed? He handed it to me with written instructions to record it for Savannah. I did that the next morning. Peter asked whether Savannah knew. No, Jesse said. Then how could she accept it? Timothy testified about Douglas's work on the homestead after his diagnosis, the creek measurements, and the grazing use that continued across the northern diversion. Did Mr. Robles seem confused? Helen asked. He forgot lunch twice. A few people in the back smiled. Timothy continued. He didn't forget boundaries. He walked them with me. He knew which post leaned and which culvert froze. Catherine came next. She used her cane to reach the witness chair and told the court about the promise Douglas made to his dying father. When Douglas visited you in 2021, what did he say? Helen asked. He said the homestead would stay in the family. Then he asked whether I remembered the seller. Did he understand that Savannah would own it? He said, it's hers now, if I finish the papers right. David carried a document case to the witness stand. He placed the original deed beneath the courtroom's evidence camera. The image appeared on a screen beside Judge Mercer. What did you compare? Helen asked. The signed deed recovered from the lockbox, the certified recorder's copy, the public index, and the retained use agreement. Your conclusion? The lockbox deed is the original instrument recorded by the county in 2021. Every mark matches, including the signature, notary seal, fold pattern, filing stamp, and microfilm reference. Peter stood for cross-examination. Can you testify that Douglas Robles was mentally competent? No, I can testify that the document is authentic and internally consistent with related filings made over several months. So, your report doesn't answer the incapacity claim. It answers the suggestion that the deed was created later, left undelivered, or hidden from the public record. David turned toward the screen. The county's copy and the lockbox original are the same deed. The public record has said Savannah Robles owned this parcel since June of 2021. That was the mechanism. Not the cabin's condition, not who ran cattle, and not who felt entitled to the river bottom. Douglas had signed the property away while living. Jesse had delivered it. The county had recorded it. At death, Douglas no longer owned it. Gabrielle testified last. She explained the 1912 priority date in ordinary terms. Every identified downstream claim came later, she said. The Robles homestead right stands first in line during shortage, subject to final confirmation and historic use limits. Helen handed her the private appraisal estimate. What is the estimated combined value of the land and senior right? Approximately $4.1 million. The courtroom went silent. Connor lowered his head. Michaela looked at the binder she'd organized around the belief that Savannah had received nothing. Angela stared toward the evidence screen, where Douglas's signature remained enlarged. Peter objected to the valuation as preliminary. Judge Mercer allowed it for the limited purpose of explaining why the filing mattered. Helen faced Gabrielle. Has Savannah threatened to stop downstream use? No. What did she tell you when you explained that possibility? She said she didn't want to shut anyone off. Judge Mercer reviewed the deed and retained use agreement once more. Then she removed her glasses. The challengers have shown that Douglas Robles was ill, she said. They have not shown he lacked capacity when this transfer was planned, signed, delivered, and recorded. Michaela's pen stopped. The original deed matches the county's recorded copy. The related agreement shows a deliberate lifetime arrangement. The homestead parcel was not owned by Douglas Robles at his death and is not part of the probate estate. Angela closed her eyes. The challenge is dismissed. Outside the courtroom, Connor approached Savannah near the stone steps. You'll sell eventually, he said. Call me first. No. You don't even know what running that place costs. I'm learning. $4 million changes people. It changed your offer before it changed me. Connor looked as if he might argue, but Timothy stepped out behind her. Savannah held up one hand. I'm not taking your development access. Don't send workers onto my property again. Don't chain my road. If you want to speak to me, you call first. Connor nodded once and walked away. Angela waited near the courthouse door. Douglas should have told me, she said. He should have told both of us many things. I was trying to keep the ranch secure. I know. Angela searched Savannah's face for forgiveness and didn't find it. Can we fix this? She asked. Not today. Someday? Maybe. But you don't get to decide the pace anymore. Angela accepted that with a small movement of her head. It wasn't reconciliation. It was the first honest boundary they had had. In early spring, Savannah met Gabrielle at the homestead with representatives from the Water Users Association. Maps covered the repaired table. The association proposed a formal sharing agreement. Savannah would preserve the senior priority, but coordinate seasonal flows instead of demanding the full amount whenever water ran low. Historic stock use would continue. Downstream ranches would help maintain measuring equipment, diversion structures, and creek banks. Gabrielle pointed to the northern pasture. This portion supports Timothy's cattle and documents continued use. Do you want his lease included? Yes, Savannah said. Long-term, with renewal terms he can plan around. Timothy sat across from her. We still need to settle a fair rate. We will. I'm not taking charity. I'm not offering it. I need a foreman who argues with me before I make expensive mistakes. He considered that. Then my rate went up. Now you sound like Connor. Take it back. Savannah smiled and signed the water sharing agreement in Douglas Robles' name. She didn't sell the right. She didn't use it to starve the ranch or frighten people downstream. Its value removed the immediate danger around taxes, repairs, and legal costs. Its purpose remained in the creek, where it could support working ground. Restoration took most of the year. Savannah moved out of the apartment above the laundromat after the cabin passed inspection. Timothy helped level the porch and rebuild the cattle fence. Catherine chose the new kitchen curtains, then complained that Savannah hung them half an inch too low. The old cook stove went back into service after a chimney. Mason repaired the flue. The cracked lantern received new glass. Savannah repaired her mother's wooden spoon and placed it in the kitchen drawer. She kept the cellar dry and fitted the lockbox with a new door. The original papers remained in archival storage, but copies rested inside, along with Douglas's letters and the 1923 silver dollar. One autumn afternoon, Angela arrived carrying the red wool blanket that had belonged to Savannah's mother. "I found it in the ranch house linen closet," she said. "You said it was on your bed." "It was. Dad borrowed it during his last winter." "I didn't know." Savannah took the blanket. Angela looked toward the creek where Timothy was repairing a gate. "Connor's development plans are finished," she said. "He's looking at land closer to Great Falls." And Michaela, still angry about the hearing, about being wrong in public. Savannah folded the blanket over her arm. "That may take time." Angela nodded. "I won't come without calling again." "Thank you." It wasn't an embrace. It wasn't a clean repair. Angela left after 5 minutes, and that was enough for the day. By winter, cattle moved through the north pasture under Timothy's lease. Measuring posts stood at both diversions. When water levels changed, Savannah received the same reports as the downstream ranchers. The homestead had become a working place again. Boots gathered beside the door. Coffee sat too long on the stove. Catherine kept a sweater over one chair because she visited often enough to need it. If stories about young people rebuilding a life after family betrayal matter to you, subscribe and return for the next inheritance story. At dusk, Savannah placed another piece of wood on the fire and closed the screen. The restored hearthstone lay firm beneath her boots, its round mark still visible. She stepped into the open doorway. Timothy's cattle moved quietly beyond the fence. Spring Creek carried the last light between the cottonwoods. Behind her, the cabin windows glowed against the coming dark. Savannah stood there with one hand on the repaired frame, finally, fully home.